Welcome, welcome, welcome. This is Mercedes Warwick, and welcome to the Mindfulness of Healing. It is a sponsored program by my business, Sacred Key, and I am very happy to be here on YouTube. This is a transition from the spirituality of cancer to the mindfulness of healing, primarily because of some experiences that I've had over the last few months. I went through the first time in 5 years, I went through some chemo back in November, and it was an experience. And it really put me through just a range of emotion, experiences, and healing. Originally, when I was diagnosed in 2017, the spirituality of the experience was just so overwhelming and so present and so poignant that when I started to want to talk about it, I talked about it from the point of view of the spirituality, what cancer was bringing to me spiritually. And I still very deeply believe in that. However, I also believe that it's so personal I can't talk about it in some ways. I have been stuck. It has been deep, it has been transformative, and it has been deeply, deeply personal and intimate. And maybe someday it will be a book or something, but right now it's like when I was going through this chemotherapy, what I learned was that there is truly a mindfulness, and that mindfulness was the undercurrent of how cancer was becoming a spiritual experience for me. And this is, I believe, going to be easier to share. It's going to be less emotional. While I may shed some tears, they will be tears of revelation and tears of joy. And I'm looking forward to talking about the healing, the spirituality of the healing experience, as a number of different people in my life have gone through, well, just COVID, the pandemic. Life is changing. There's a lot of healing going around right now. There's grief, so much grief that is, as we transition from what was to what we are becoming and what is being in this moment to beyond what we think our capabilities are, what we think our limitations are. And so what I found is what I have been profoundly exposed to as an expression of the divine through cancer is really the same thing that a lot of people are going through on their own specific individual journeys. And so that's the reason for the change. I want to be able to talk. I want to be sitting in a room with people from a number of different experiences coming into this shared experience, knowing that the principles of God, I don't even want to say the laws of God because there's so many different connotations, but the principles, that's just the innate spiritual principles and our decent humanity, our goodness as human beings, and our ability to create within ourselves a relationship with the divine that allows us to move forward in our lives. I began to think and express and do breath-infused prayer, and that has influenced my lifestyle. So now I say that I live a divine-infused or prayer-infused life. Just really briefly, the other thing that happened is the first 8 treatments of chemo. What happened was there was some indications that there was chemo going on in my body. I mean, there was cancer active in my body, and nothing was kind of knocking it out. We couldn't get it nutritionally and couldn't get it prayerfully. I mean, it was just the numbers just were increasing and increasing and increasing. And so the doctors, knowing what they know, said it's time for chemo. And I had done some research, and I went into prayer. I treated this exactly the way I've done everything else. I went into the I am mind. I sat quietly. I received my guidance. The doctor was saying it was going to be 6 treatments. My guidance was saying it was going to be 8, and to do them. That was the other thing. My guidance was saying to do the treatments. And what happened was the treatments, for a number of different reasons, but one in particular, were not being effective. My doctor left, and I received another doctor who looked at my chart and said, "Why are you still on this medication? It suppresses the cancer, therefore the chemo can't go after it." So he recommended, past the 8 treatments that my guidance had said, he recommended another course of treatment, another 4 to 8 treatments. And at the time, and it was supposed to be easier chemo, so the first set of chemo was 5 hours. I was in and out in 45 minutes to an hour in 30 minutes at the max for this next round. But it kicked my butt. It really did truly kick my butt. And what I believed happened on so many different layers was the first round of chemo, those first 8 treatments, I believed I had guidance, and I came in there prepared. I went into deep spirit, and it was 5 hours. So I went in 4 to 5 hours. So I went in to a deep spiritual immersion every time I took one of those treatments. I had very little side effects. I did have some. I don't want to say that I didn't have any. But I had very little side effects. And matter of fact, in one of my posts, I remember saying, I had this glorious experience in chemotherapy today because the immersion, the spiritual immersion, was so deep. And I'd walk in there, I'll talk about it a different time, but I walked in there with 3 bags. I mean, I looked like I was moving in. I had 3 bags. I had a spiritual bag, I had my spiritual toolkit, I had my nutritional toolkit, and I had my support or comfort toolkit with me. So when I walked into those sessions, I went into complete spiritual immersion. The last 4 treatments, they were an hour and a half. I went into immersion beforehand from my house, but I never really kind of got the grasp of the rhythms were all off and everything, and I tanked. I tanked deeply. And so from January to just about now, we're in April of 2022, I was down. I was in my bed. I was weak, very weak. I had all of the typical side effects that you would imagine that would come with chemo. And I had to go I went to the mat. I didn't get on my knees. I was on my mat. We created a new sacred space, and I just crawled into it. There was times that I was in the fetal position crying, begging my body for forgiveness, because I felt at that time that I had not followed guidance, for a number of different reasons. We just got into this sort of, like, I didn't question, I didn't stop, I didn't go into discernment and inquiry. It was just this sort of, this is what's going on and this is what we got to do. And I just sort of fell right into it. So as I was going through getting up off of the floor, literally, and gathering strength, and I didn't want to see people. I mean, I saw my psyche individually, my brain. I mean, I saw the separation. I saw a tear. I could see, because I'm gifted in a certain way, I could see what the chemo was doing to my body, and I just was devastated, physically, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually. And all I could do was, I could not even remember my personal sequencing. I talk about radiant soul balancing. There's sequencing. There's I am sequencing that I couldn't remember. I was so weak and chemo fogged that I couldn't get to my personal sequencing. And so all I could do is my 36 breaths. I had my prayer beads, and I would just breathe. I don't even know that I could whisper the I am. And my guidance was with me constantly. So that kind of took care of the fear. But the other thing that happened as they gave me some things to do, and so that's what I began to do. And one of them was the sigh of release. And I would stay in the sigh of release for hours and hours and hours. I would just breathe. And my dog, Priya, when I was doing the sigh of release, she's very sensitive. She would just move away from me. I don't know what was coming up and out of me, but I would just sit there and I would just breathe the sigh of release and breathe the sigh of release and just lean into what was happening to me at the time. And I began to receive downloads, and I couldn't even begin to tell you. They were so different about what to do in order to get myself energetically ready to be strengthened and renewed. So the mindfulness of healing, I'm using the word healing, but when we go into these deep spaces, it's like with no intention to truly just surrender into the dynamic environment that is God, and to be in acceptance and allowance of what comes forward from that. What flows, the language that I use is what flows in from that. And I remember, I didn't think I was going to die necessarily. I didn't think it was my time to transition. But I was weak. I'm grateful to my crew as always, but I didn't want to see anybody. And, true love is one day I got a text, and one of my elders said, "Go to your front door." And when I went to my front door, there was a box of saltine crackers, and she said, "This is what my mother used to give me when I didn't feel well." And at that moment, I realized how wonderful and how deeply I was loved, because she respected me enough not to want to come in and talk. And, I just didn't have the strength. So I think that is enough for now. There is a point in this journey that I believe we have to have enough trust of guidance to know that the peace of God, the grace of God, the mercy of God, the undefined, unscripted, unintentioned, just existing, becomes God's expression in our lives. And when that happens, then we can be in complete acceptance of what is before us. And sometimes the steps are measured and maybe even seem like you're going backwards a little bit. That happened with me physically. And I had to just stay in the presence, that compassionate presence, that sitting or laying in this case, in the compassionate presence, and truly emptying out so that the flow of God could come in. So my hope is to begin to talk about these things and not be a spiritual teacher anymore, but to be a spiritual muse, because I think that this is a non-linear process. And while I may say there are some things that I have done that have opened me up or allowed new pathways to become enlightened so that I can see a way, I don't think it's my job to say, do it this way and this is the only way. And I've known that for a long time, but this experience has really deepened my conviction to be in a process of non-linearity and to be able to bring others into an understanding of that, so that the unknown is not so scary. Because, and what I found, because I have dealt with people with, I haven't done any hands-on energetic healing in a long time. And over the course of these last few days, I even had a person I didn't know come through my home. And I've been able to do some radiant soul balancing and talk about how deeply personal and intimate your own journey is, your own transformative space is, and how you can be in that environment of God, that ecosystem, and know that the peace of God is truth. And whatever is before you in this deeply indescribable peace, you will be able to move through your journey in a way that is merciful and graceful, even though it is humbling, unexpected, in this case debilitating in some ways, and scary, quite honestly. I had a couple of fears came up, and this is the other thing, and then I am going to sign off but this was the other thing that happened when I was in that process of deeply releasing, just doing the sigh of release for as long as I could, sessions for as long as I could, multiple sessions throughout the day, I might add too, not just one. And as I'm in that, these 3 things came up that I thought I had dealt with. And these were 3 fears that have followed me most, if not all, of my life. And it came up in this situation through that releasing of the fear. So blessings, 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 blessings be unto you. It is my deep, deep honor, excuse me, to be here and to be able to share. And I would say this is what we're going to do and this is what we're going to do, but I really don't know at this point. I'm in the process of just transitioning and listening and knowing that the hurt is that while I am on this cancer journey, I want to be able to speak to healing, speak to healing in a deeply personal, spiritual immersion, as well as in a context of healing what is happening in our world. All right. Blessings be unto you. Namaste. Thank you for being here.